This is Tribe Talks, the future of education and entrepreneurship.
Today we have a few incredible established and next-gen changemakers to speak. From Jacob Schulman, the founder of Triibe Venture Group, Dr. Davis, who will be joining us shortly, Nate Tinbit, who is on the board for the Ready to School initiative, and Ben Christensen, with the head of partnerships for AI 2030. So, just as a quick overview, Tribe, our foundation, funds next-gen nonprofit founders, and we provide conversations to demonstrate that age does not determine the quality of one's voice. Always in our Tribe Talk format of 2 established and 2 next-gen changemakers. So truly I look forward to really getting in and allowing us to have this type of conversation. Please keep questions for the end and then feel free to ask, because we do want to ensure that you guys get out of it what you'd like, especially as I'm looking forward to getting out the conversations that I want. So Jacob, we're going to start with you. We may have to play past the mic. So starting with the liberal arts edge. Jacob, you've made a strong case for why founders from liberal arts backgrounds, like your own, are often the most resilient. So in an increasingly specialized economy, how can we reshape education to value conviction over hype and grit over pedigree?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming very much. Thank you, Kyle, for hosting. Thank you to the venue. I'm Jacob. I'm from the Boston area. Super excited to be talking with you all tonight. This summer, started to figure out what I want to do with my life, and I had some experiences starting a landscaping company, doing some internships in finance and consulting, but none of them really, got me out of the bed in the morning. So I started talking to a bunch of founders, old people, young people, people starting every sort of idea, and especially from schools from backgrounds similar to mine. So I go to Hamilton College, which maybe you've never heard of it. It's a small liberal arts school in upstate New York, and it's part of this conference called the NESCAC conference, which is a bunch of prestigious small liberal arts schools. But what I decided is it really doesn't matter what background you come from, you can be a great founder, and that's what we see. I started Triibe this August. Now we've done about $250,000 of investing in the next generation of entrepreneurs that come from non-traditional backgrounds, especially liberal arts schools, and that's been our focus. So we've been meeting people in all different spaces, especially the younger generation people. We invest in students. We also invest in alumni of these institutions across all geographies, all industries. One background being the educational background you come from. Even if you didn't go to MIT, you didn't go to Harvard, you didn't go to Stanford, you can still build an incredible company, and that's what we're looking for.
Wonderful. To you, Dr. Davis. So, the role of purpose-aligned capital. You've built the Forum for World Education around the idea of transforming education through inclusive dialogue among business, academia, and policymakers. How do you see purpose-aligned capital playing a role in reshaping education systems so they are truly future-ready and equitable?
So, yes, do you want me to talk about the forum? And the forum and for the forward education is set up in year 2018 by the Penn trustee, Mr. Paul Kelly. And he is the investment banker, and he concerned, and no business people have opportunity to talking about our education, and we need to listen to the business people how they want our university, and to educate the young people, and how they scale, and also all of this requirement. So that's why this organization is set up, and to invite the business leaders and have communication with university educators and also the policy makers. So that's we built up.
Thank you so much. Nate, on your end, you served as a voting member on a major board of education, right, before even graduating high school with Montgomery County. And so What did that experience teach you about the difference between symbolic youth participation and systemic youth power?
That's a great question. And also thank you for having me. So just wanted to share that when I was in the school district in Montgomery County, one thing that I saw pretty quickly was that there were a lot of administrators and school board members, unfortunately, who hadn't stepped in classrooms for over a decade. And they were making budgetary decisions and staffing decisions, multi-million dollars, and for thousands of workers. And one thing that a lot of young folks like myself and I tried to do at that time was to push the policymakers to get into the schools, to understand what students are experiencing, their main avenue of insight into the classrooms. And so, firstly, we saw successful organizing by hundreds of high schoolers at that time in 2019 and in 2020 who were pushing policy and getting administrators to step into the school building. And that was great. But one thing that was missing was the real convincing of the hearts and minds of these administrators and school board members at the actual dais in changing policy. And so when I had the opportunity to serve on that board, I recognized how hard it is to get these people to change their minds about policy and how to galvanize support for different things that are affecting the school district. And what I saw when I got there was that people like myself and other young policymakers elsewhere were restless to actually have a change in their bureaucracies and in their institutions. And so the big difference that I saw was that, firstly, actually a big similarity is that people were restless both outside and within the institutions. Restless for change and for a new future for the institutions that we all engage with. What was different was actually having things get done, and I think that the youth who were organizing outside of an institution had the opportunity to do the homework, but probably saw marginal change. And those that ended up serving, I hope, in my circumstance and other young policymakers, had the opportunity to do the homework, to convince the people why certain policies should get changed. And that was the big difference that I saw. And so there was hope in seeing people actually sit in the seats and get things done.
Incredible. Ben, at AI 2030, you talk about building responsible AI at the speed of trust. When the market rewards speed and dominance, how do you incentivize founders to slow down enough to ensure their algorithms are fair and transparent?
That's a very good question. We're still trying to figure it out. But what we've found so far, and what I've found is my thesis, is AI adoption begins with people. I'm Ben Christensen. I identify as a human. Hi. Anyone who identifies as a human? I've been in rooms where not everybody identifies as a human, just to be fair. We can talk about that one later. But to build trust, I want you to know that I'm also a human, first of all. We're building technologies at the speed of light. We have, it was Murphy's Law, take whatever else, the brainiest folks that you have, engineers building things. We're building at pushing the edges of physics. But when it comes to things like trust or culture, trust being the ultimate human currency, one of my former CEOs at SAP was known for saying, that can make things slower or faster, arguably, than that computational speed of light, so to speak. And when I say that, the speed of computational electronic in that sense. Because when you don't have the speed of trust, when you have, I don't actually believe that system has a moral architecture or has imagined the scenarios that I'm facing as a policymaker or as a citizen in this community, we slow down. And it doesn't matter how advanced the technology is. But when we have the trust, well, we can do a lot more. So at AI 2030, which I should introduce as an initiative to mainstream responsible AI professionals, products, and trainings. We're 6,000 folks in 60 countries now. We have an accelerator for startups, as well as training credentials for the next generation of education, AI skills, for making sure we have professionals. We want to make sure that there's a benchmark of what does it mean to be a responsible AI practitioner or a responsible AI startup. And with that framework, we have a responsible AI pledge, and we hold the G20 countries responsible as well. They're not answering our calls. They have other people to talk to for now. But in partnership with Cornell University, for example, we built the G20 Regulation Index for Responsible AI. And we like to hold folks accountable for this. This is how I'll start the answer.
Thank you. I guess going back down to Jacob. If you wouldn't mind passing the mic. Jacob, you're currently finishing up your senior year while running Triibe. So when you look at your peers, do you see a tension between the traditional safe path of senior year and the desire to build something independent? How has being a student changed how you evaluate the market readiness of an idea?
That's a good one. I think being a student actually gives me an advantage. Not only do I have a .edu email address, which more people respond to, but it allows me to resonate more closely with my peers, a lot of whom are starting successful businesses. It's great to see some of my team here in the audience as well. I'm a senior, I'm a senior finishing up, and I think if I wasn't building Triibe, I'd be slacking off for senior spring anyways, but I've got a thesis to do, but my main focus is building this market space which helps to support the future of liberal arts entrepreneurs. There are just so many of them out there, so many people have ideas, but it's really hard to take that first step and to capitalize on that. And in venture, you see a lot of traditional older venture people from Ivy League institutions, and I know we've got some Ivy Leaguers on this panel, and I respect that a lot. .com era, but 10 times that with AI and how many people are starting startups. And the venture world needs to change to incubate these startups as well. And I think a lot of them are going to come from the liberal arts sector, people that from non-traditional backgrounds, because they can use AI to start companies. I'm not very technical myself, but I've been able to use Claude and other platforms to become sufficient in building websites and things like that, and a lot of other people have been capitalizing on that. And as a student, I just think I'm in the epicenter of this environment where the change is happening the fastest, and that allows me to resonate and really connect to founders so that I can partner with those companies not just tomorrow, but in 5 and 10 years. As I grow, they'll also be growing.
Brilliant. I appreciate you taking your time. I feel like it's a tremendous honor to have 4 completely different perspectives on a panel, from in studies to just out of it, to leading it, to facilitating the ethics around it. So, Dr. Davis, navigating timelines, education responds to long timelines, but while capital often seeks the quick outcomes, how do you navigate that tension in your practice?
First of all, I wanted to continue what he said about the AI. The AI and it's a FWE, our organization, is organized a bigger conference in Hong Kong in May, and this coming May. And why we organize this conference with Hong Kong Science Technology University? Because we want to know another country, how they're doing this AI, and how the AI education influence our young generations. And we want teachers' education for AI, and also parents' education for AI, because we don't want our young generation lose their judgment. Because in the social media, so many things there, and how we can make the kids know what they should watch, what they should not watch. And the AI developed so fast, and at the same time, and the educator face a big challenge. And if we don't have the good and the guidance for the parents and also the teachers, we will lose the young generation, and because they social media's information, some of them they may should not watch it, they may not should to know it. So that's the big challenge for the education community. But I think we use this conference the May to learn from another country how they have the good national planning and for teacher education as what is the regulation for AI company to produce the things not abuse our children and the generation. So that's I want to answer this. And another question you have?
Yes, thank you. On your question now, when education responds to long timelines, well, capital often seeks quick outcomes, how do you navigate that tension in practice?
You want to use my slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll go.
Move my head.
I cannot see the slides. So, and I just wanted to tell you the things what we consider this the education for the very unfortunately, and in our own country, United States, we are much behind another nation, and we particularly for the public education, you can see the the information we provide on this the screen, and you can see and how and we concerned and to make sure and we can have opportunity learning from another nation, and particularly our public education, and no country like in the world like U.S. we use the property tax funding school. And we divide the rich and the poor use education. And our disadvantaged population never had the chance to have the rich area and the property tax, the school built, they have much better resource. They have a much the opportunity. But at the same time, you also say, and money is not the only thing. And we spend too much money on the students. You can see the number. But the results is we don't have the good turned out. And that is our students, particularly on the math and the science. And the OECD study and the US 15 years old students much behind the average the level. So, and Ray Dalio, and I think most people know this guy's name, and he is Bridgewater's CEO. He indicated almost 60% of our population in the US and cannot read and cannot have elementary school level. So it's not just the money, and we have to think about what our policymakers is doing for our education.
Thank you. Can I build on that? By all means.
A great point in the slide that was brought up. So, I mean, that illustration is glaring. So I want to use Montgomery County Public Schools, which is where I'm from, a very well-funded school district, as the example of what was just discussed. In this district, there are 160,000 students, so it's very densely populated. There's a $3 billion there's $3 billion operating budget, and every single high school and middle school is pretty much within a couple minutes of each other. And the reason why I ran for the school board back then was because you'll have two high schools that are 5 minutes away from each other, one of which is drawing from a heavily impacted population and the other which isn't. And to make the example even more glaring, one of these schools, and what I saw, had a double-decker parking garage with 99% graduation rates, and the other had 50% graduation rates, and teachers literally telling me as I was running to get elected, pleading for more resources in their schools. And so I believe that there's a future in which young people are envisioning a better, more well-functioning institution with proper allocation of resources, and there's hope where we get together and start to create a sense of urgency for these people that are running for these institutions to show them that our lives are on the line, young people's lives are on the line. Now we get to the question, but just it was pissing me off when I was seeing all that in the school district. Just not enough urgency.
Well, I feel like when we first discussed a few weeks back and connected over the first Monday night, I was surprised to know that there was room for a change in facilities where they would allow someone like you to become on the board. Based on your age, most would assume that that's not even possible. But I think what inspires me most about the next generation is this desire for limitless growth and youthful innocence or youthful optimism that you don't know when to assume or accept something that has been the norm just because it's not part of your norm. The question I have for you, though, is the Washington Post has profiled your journey from a student organizer to a national voice for equity. Looking back on that coverage, how do you think the media's portrayal of youth changemakers needs to evolve to capture the actual grit and policy work required to change a system?
Great question again. Great question, one after another. So, unfortunately, we live in this time where we're seeing national media outlets get gutted, and that in turn actually directly affects, specific localities and coverage of localities. So, Washington Post being the example, there's less coverage on, let's say, like Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and more of a national focus. And so, it's harder now more than ever to get these national news outlets to cover the everyday work of everyday heroes. But that being said, we all do have our phones, right? And I'm starting to see more and more content, I hope, drown out bad voices and bad actors online, more content that captures the everyday heroes' work. And I'll give an example. One thing that I saw was Baltimore's Mayor Brandon Scott on a podcast, long-form podcast, just talking about the work that he was doing. This is a new type of media that he's engaging with his viewers that's different than your traditional news outlet. And in this video that I saw went viral, he was talking about how he reduced Baltimore's gun violence rates by 60% from 2021 till now, right? And he's a young elected official who's reaching out in the ways that people need to hear and is actually being quite effective in it. And so that's one example, but I think another is the work that we all can do on an everyday timeline, and that's sharing the stories that we find to be beautiful, endorsing acts of kindness and love online. And so I think this builds on the gaps that are oncoming by traditional news outlets and their lapse of funding, and is the work that we can do to sort of flip the script of what we're seeing online. And so that's my take on that.
Yeah, by all means, go for it.
You were talking about hope, and there's reasons to hope. Your examples, Kyle, yourself included, this tribe of reasons to believe. It's been said that permission is granted by people who do things first. Thank you for giving permission to make breakthroughs outside of boundaries. To the question that you asked him, and to the examples that you all are. I'm really privileged to be here. I just wanted to say that. Thanks.
I appreciate that. I'm more grateful to be inspired by you. I'm just the moderator here. So I have a question for you, Ben, of course. So the UN and AI 2030 emphasize AI's role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for using AI in solving the global education crisis, specifically for the 100,000 professionals you aim to empower?
Thank you for asking me such a great layup question. So since we're talking about the whole world, there's 8.2 billion people in the world. 9 billion people, perhaps, if you consider AI agents as people to work with, as co-workers. I mean, controversial, but it's a discussion, is it not? And we need the change makers to work on that with us, I guess. So, in the roaring 2020s, which is what I call where we're at, in the middle of the 2026 year, we have this opportunity to ask better questions. In the age of AI, we're very easily entertained. And attention becomes a very valuable resource. Well, curiosity goes down when we're overly entertained and easily entertained and distracted. So our 8.2 billion people and the nuances of who we are can get lost in low quality intercultural dialogue. The cost of conflict in the world has been rated at $13 trillion. And now that we can solve that just by asking each other better questions. But in the age of AI, it prompts us a human-like renaissance to be more curious about each other's backgrounds, the nuances of our personal identities. All that to say is the full spectrum of human intelligence is one of the best ways that we can apply AI. Who here has prompted an AI generative bot? Hopefully everybody. You ask questions and it leads to other questions. Do you ask different questions to the AI that you ask to the humans, the people that you trust around you? I do. Because it's low quality, there's a low threshold, there's a lot going on there. But the more we're able to encourage human, AI can be best used when it's fostering human connections. And when it comes to AI education, and to answer your question, there's 100,000 responsible AI professionals that's actually holding ourselves as a goal. We're using AI to augment our human intelligences, but also our moral capacity and our curiosity quotients about each other. Because if we're not curious, well, condemnation starts when curiosity ends. And curiosity starts when condemnation ends. So that's how I apply AI.
Brilliant. I think it was Jan, so the past chief scientist for Meta. Am I getting his
Jan LeCun.
Yes, and I got to hear him speak in Davos, and the first thing that he said at this huge AI panel was, we should rethink the concept of AGI because it's the G that has a problem. There's no such thing as general intelligence for humans, so why should we call the same for machines? And of course now he just raised, I think, $1 billion for his new version of AI, which was yesterday. Well, perhaps an alternative additional question, but Jacob, back to you. If you wouldn't mind. My time. Yeah, we'll get to that afterwards. So Jacob, based on what you see on campus and in your network, what is the most critical missing infrastructure for students who want to take root today? Is it capital, or is it a specific kind of community that current universities are not providing?
I think it's both. It's capital and lack of community, and Triibe exists to fix both of those problems at the same time. I want to touch back a little bit. The theme of this panel is education. And what is a liberal arts education? Well, it's more than just saying Bachelor of Arts on your resume. I'm a history major. Studying the humanities or anything that's non-technical allows you to think in different and creative ways. And as we were talking about before, the best way to build a company is just by bringing a lot of things together. To build a company, you need to build a product. You need to sell the product. You need to bring in investors. You need to test things out. So you need a lot of different skills, and the liberal arts education is the crux of a lot of that. What does Triibe mean? Triibe is means the three components of liberal arts education: logic, rhetoric, and grammar. And so what our network is doing as we grow, and as all of our networks grow, at Triibe we bring together founders and an investor community. So you can invest either your time or your capital into these entrepreneurs with liberal arts backgrounds on a deal-by-deal basis. So we're not a fund. You choose who you want to support, who you want to invest in. And I think these entrepreneurs need both. Capital is hard to access, especially for those from underrepresented backgrounds, liberal arts backgrounds. And also, not everyone has the same network, and so we're stitching that all together. It's all out there. That's what networking is, and I think we're positioned to be at the forefront of creating this really powerful ecosystem for the next generation of founders.
Yeah, let's do that. Dr. Davis. rethinking success when education is viewed as diplomacy and social infrastructure. How should investors rethink what success looks like, such as social cohesion or opportunity creation?
Yeah, and I want you to understand one thing, and where they and education should be invested. And our experience with 17 countries and the education, first of all, invest on the teachers. And without have a good teacher, we cannot have good students. Teachers number one, and that is very important. I give you an example, and the British and Britain invest the math teachers because they say the British students, the math scores, and the OECD countries study indicated they are behind many countries. So, and the British government decided to invest 41 million in Japan to empower entirely British math teachers. And they sent the math teachers to Shanghai, China, and to learning math, how to teach math. And then they sent the students to the teachers to Singapore, and together to learning how the Asian kids has a better math skill. So, and they invest the results 8 years later. We did the research, and the British students, 8,000 school elementary students math scores improved. The teacher, 800 teachers exchange between London and Shanghai for 6 years. So, but our teacher in America, they don't have opportunity, and they paid very low, and also they don't have the credential and really teaching math. And after 3 o'clock, some taxi drivers in New York, they are teachers. They have to survive 2 jobs to survive their life. So that is not good situation. That is not the situation to improve our math education for our kids. So, and I do not say any policymakers care about this, but we care. We want to make the noise. We want you to support our teachers and to have a good education and also have a good pay. You go to the Singapore, I ask the president of the Singapore, why your teachers have the 10 times salary than my faculty and the University of Pennsylvania? And because his answer is Singapore has no natural resource. We have to invest in the people by education. So that's, you can say, how the leaders to taking care of the education, but we don't have it.
That's great.
Nate, at Strategic Education, right, you're working on the infrastructure of adult and online learning. How does your experience in student advocacy inform how you design educational products for people who don't follow the standard four-year residential path?
Sure. For context, I also work at this company called Strategic Education that builds learning products and educational programs for adult learners. And man, that's a great question because there are many parallels that I see between the work that I'm doing right now, those that I experienced with traditional university systems like SUNY, State University of New York, and then with the school district. The biggest thing that I've recognized is that everyone learns differently, right? Clearly. And so it's one thing that was very glaring is that everyone learns differently, but we have a standardized approach to delivering educational content to all of these millions and billions of people within our institutions. right? And so what ends up happening is that you have a lot of people who are left behind. I saw, like I mentioned to you all earlier, a lot of students that were failing classes, not graduating, dropping out, but not because they didn't have an interest in learning, but because the institutions didn't meet them where they're at, right? And so what I'm seeing right now is, at least at Strategic Education, is an interest to meet these adult learners where they're at, upskill them, focus on workforce development, and help them have a dignified job or career path that means something to them. But I do have one caveat, is that I haven't seen many traditional institutions like the state university, a public institution funded by the state focus on workforce development on that front for people that are over 24 years old or 30 years old. So I think there's work to be done. Nevertheless, the point that I want to say is that we have to meet learners where they're at. That was no different than what I saw when I was in the school district, a gap in meeting learners where they're at, and right now we need to do the same for adult learners that might be displaced in this economy.
I think living in Copenhagen, we'd go to classrooms where all the students are above 30, and it was really inspiring to see that they quite honestly relate, almost in the same way that in New York they say that 30 is the new 20, and so in that sense, of course, they'd be in college. Right? It was really surprising to see how they had very similar experiences and more determination to be in the classroom.
Yes. But I just want to add one more thing. Our institutions need to get in this constant loop of making that the norm, or making the norm of meeting learners who are 40 or 20 or whatever it is, like just meeting them where they're at, right? And I don't see enough of that in this day and age, or I see too much of a commodification of that. And so I agree with you. There should be a norm of being a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I think my parents raised me with the statement, don't let schooling get in the way of education. And perhaps that's actually a negative term because it's saying that education is this thing blocking, or schooling is getting in the way. But in reality, it might just be my bias towards American schooling. I have a question, right? But you can answer too, but let me ask the question first. Education responds to decades-long timelines, but our current tech culture is obsessed with quarterly wins. So how do we teach the next generation to move with the long term in mind when they are facing the immediate short-term stresses of a volatile job market and rapid AI disruption?
Yes, how do we do that? The right question, and thank you for letting me answer the other one too. Because you mentioned Copenhagen and 20 and 40, I should let you know, 20 years ago when I was 20, I lived in Copenhagen. I'm a Danish citizen. So I told you my name is Ben Christensen, but that's just the name I tell people. My real first name is Fleming, which in every country in the world is a last name except for Denmark. Or, it's the only place where it's an actual first. You're probably like, I see why you go by Ben, right? Which is my middle name. But when I went to Denmark, when I dropped out of school in the US, where, paid into this ecosystem, and went to Denmark, I thought, everyone's going to understand if I go by Fleming, it'll be good. No, that's an old man's name, they told me. So I went by Ben anyway. But I ended up studying using that Danish citizenship. I know you talked about Singapore and how things are different there, the ecosystems matter, and the opportunities for everyone. You talked about people over 30. I was a dropout who joined a circus, moved to Denmark, lived with his grandmother, and then went back to school at the IT University of Copenhagen. And the state paid for it. Taxpayers. Not me. I mean, I earned some money. But that was a great gift and an opportunity. Is that the model that we need here? Maybe not. But wow, I learned so much. That education is an opportunity for folks. Talent is everywhere. You mentioned opportunity is not. There are school shortages, but even more so, there's life, misadventure, catastrophe. Like, wait, who needs to upskill on AI right now, for example? I've asked chief legal officers this question of multinational companies, like, how do you stay up? I don't stay up on it. I have to do whatever. It's a thing for every level when you have adult learners and everything. So I look at that and I think, yes, what you're solving, more of that. Yeah, it was great in Denmark. I loved it. And to your point, Jacob, if I may so say, don't remember what it was. Something about mobility. Oh yeah, I remember. You're talking about Harvard and MIT and some things like this. It was at the very beginning. Thanks for your patience. When I was studying at the IT University of Copenhagen, no, I was in Palo Alto, working for SAP, leading the student entrepreneurship program for the Western United States. Super fun stuff. There was this person who I learned about who was like, yes, what's your education? I studied at MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. Oh, really? Yeah, Stanford online, MIT online, Harvard online. From somewhere else, another continent in the world. I'm like, that's awesome, and she owned it that way. And so that's what I did, too. Because building your own education ecosystem, which is a word I got from one of you, is one of the great opportunities here. It's not a question, there's a question.
No worries. I think my question is spinning around the idea of, I'll repeat it. Education responds to decades-long timelines, but our current tech culture is obsessed with quarterly wins. So how do we teach the next generation to move?
Here's one way that I've addressed this and that I subscribe to. Science fiction, also known as speculative fiction, takes us as linear thinkers into an exponential mindset. We tend to think in next quarter and the next urgency. And your question is mentioning how do we deal with those pressures. Well, science fiction frees our minds. When you go to the theater and you watch the latest Iron Man or whatever, or read Octavia Butler, we put ourselves in a scenario of post-apocalypse, somewhere where the SDGs already happened, expired, were achieved, or failed, right? And that allows us to bring that design intelligence back. So I co-authored a methodology, and we made it a book, Science Fiction, a Starship for Enterprise Innovation, because it allows us to answer those ethical questions of what does your business look like as an insurance company in the mid-2020s. That was the future back then, 2017, when autonomous cars are mainstream. We thought they would be mainstream by 2025. Depends on the city you're in. And how does that affect the choices that you're going to make now? Back then it was 2017. In terms of enterprise systems that are going to take a long time to build, very expensive, and a long time to unbuild if you're not flexible enough for where the market is going, for where your customers are going. That dissonance between the exponential mindset and the practical, how do we buy something that solves what our customer needs now, or how do we build a system that what our customers need now, or what each other need now when it comes to actual education ecosystem. I know I'm very biased towards the enterprise software. I was at SAP for 11 years. That's one way to pull us out of that and to activate what Jacob was calling the greatest opportunity, the humanities of our time, because it goes back to what we can do at the speed or the magnitude of our shared humanity, our shared trust. That's how I'd approach that.
Fantastic. So we have one more round of questions. These ones I would love to have some more sound bites. Nowadays, I think it's so common and prevalent that we listen to highlight reels and clips. So if you could abbreviate into, I guess, like a more succinct soundbite that we can use. I'll start with one. One of my questions, personally, that I'm still struggling with is how do I build a 5-year plan when AI has disrupted everything in 3? Jacob, my question for you, for a soundbite, is the view from the ground. As a senior and team captain, what are you seeing students do differently today than they were 4 years ago? Are they using their education as a springboard for entrepreneurship or Philentrepreneurship? Or are you seeing a shift towards using these tools to solve more immediate local problems?
Students are currently building the future. It's all ahead of us, and I think what we see on this panel is a lot of change needs to be made, and we're each doing it in our own individual ways and trying to change the educational ecosystem, as I said, to promote the next generation of leaders. What I've seen as leader of my squash team, and unfortunately my career just ended a few days ago, and as a college student, AI is completely changing the game, and not just with how students are using it for their homework, but also how people are thinking. You can be successful in a lot of different ways and from a lot of different originations, but having a liberal arts education and being able to think creatively and really learning how to think, and I know that sounds cliche, but that's sometimes the hardest thing to do. These are the people, a lot of them, that are building the next generation of great companies, and we're going to keep building Trivium to try to support those entrepreneurs and really establish this ecosystem. And I think there's a lot of other things that have been said on this panel that are also relevant and are also going to help the world adapt to AI. More people become educated about that and how to change the future. And I want to thank everyone again for coming, and a shameless plug for us, go to triviumventurenetwork.com, sign up for our newsletter. You can stay in the loop with the startups that we feature every Wednesday. You can see amazing people, old, young, from a lot of different places, building really cool things that are going to change the future. And we hope that you'll join our journey on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, a soundbite. Forum for World Education emphasizes that education should respond to the skills and knowledge requirements of a rapidly changing global society. In your experience, what kinds of purposeful investments or capital models have shown the most promise in acceleration the alignment between education and workforce readiness?
And I also want to give you the example, workforce and education. And there is a country called Switzerland, and everybody knows, and that country, and the highest quality life, and they have, why? Because of education. And they have the 75% of the 15 years old students. They not go to college. They are not going to American Ivy League school. They go to the professional and vocational schools. But the school built by company, built by manufacturing. So the students go there and to learning and learning skill. And the UBS is the biggest bank. They built the biggest school and in Zurich. And the UBS, the chairman, they never go to the regular high school and they go to the vocational school. Then he become the world's famous the investment and the financial leader. And this is the very interesting model for the students and for the society. And Swiss had the 1,000 company investing in the U.S. They complain to the White House they cannot find a worker in our country. So, and Biden signed agreement with the Swiss president, and Trump renewed that agreement, and to import their partnership to America. Now we have 10 states governors visit Switzerland, and to say what this partnership will take place. And it's very important for our kids to have this skill. And everybody knows the Apple company, why he built the company in China. And it's not the cheap labor anymore. It's because so many technology kids, the workforce, the quality. So, and he said if he called the engineer in China, and the one province, just the one state, and can fit out the football field. But in the US, he called the engineers and he said cannot fit out his office room. So we need to emphasize our kids and to have the skill. And Trump wants to bring the manufacturing industry come back. That's a good idea, but we don't have a workforce. And how we do that? And the education. So, but the White House doesn't talk about the education, so that drives me crazy. Okay, so I would like you to think about and how, I want to ask you the question. Who built up the, designed the Washington Bridge? and his name is Oma, from Switzerland. And he went to the vocational school in Zurich, and he designed the Washington Bridge. And every year, and Ambassador Switzerland and in New York, he invited us to celebrate the Swiss National Day, and where he chose under the Washington Bridge, and also the Lincoln Tunnel, also managed by him. So, and the practice and hands-on is very important for our new generation. So, and the FWE, we promote this. We organize a conference. We want to bring you to Switzerland and to look at them, how the kids and go to this school, and how they have 18 years old get paid, and they have a higher salary. We don't have it. So that's a system we need to learn from them. We need to do it. U.S. is a great country. We can do it if we. I thank you for inviting me to talking about this. I cannot control myself, so forgive me. And I love this country. I want to do it.
Nate, you've moved from local advocacy to corporate strategy. What has that shift taught you about how we can take a root-level local success and actually scale it into a national system without losing the human impact?
First part of the question makes me sound like I sold my soul, but no, I think that's a great question, and I want to start off by sharing an experience again from Montgomery County Public Schools when I was there in hearings. Essentially, I would sit down and sit with my colleagues, and we had these public hearings for 4 hours. Now imagine just sitting down for 4 hours, and I used to listen, would get tired, and then frustrated, etc., etc., etc. But it was only through time that I recognized the importance of that and other forums of collecting voices. Essentially, in that experience, I recognized that as a board, we were engaging in a constant feedback loop, right? Trying our best to understand what the parents want, what the teachers want, and what the students want. And that experience has been versatile through every single institution that I've been part of. When I'm at SUNY, or when I'm working for this educational company, I recognize that the most important thing is hearing what the customers want, what the faculty members want, what the students want, and engaging in this constant feedback loop, no matter how frustrating, is integral to the success of the organization and the organization's product, right? Being teaching and learning, or being it being like a software for education, etc. And so that is what I've learned across these sorts of experiences, and I hope that people do, regardless of whatever industry that they're in, getting out and learning what the people are using your product for, why, and just understanding, how they got there. So I also want to say thank you for having me here, and beautiful points made by the rest of the panelists.
Thank you. And Ben, last question ending with you. As AI begins to automate cognitive tasks, what quintessentially human skills should our education system double down on to ensure the next generation remains relevant, empowered, and most importantly, human?
Nate touched on this. Humanity historically trades away its hard-won freedoms of expression when economic mobility is threatened. And economic mobility is currently threatened because of the transformations that we see with AI disruption. What cognitive capabilities should be prioritized or focused on? We're all here assembled. You are all here. You have the ability to use your voice, to be on the school board, to create change, to build an ecosystem of change makers as you do. Because it's safe to wake up and come to this location, all of you in this room. And you have the liberty to do that right now. But when economic mobility is threatened, and this can happen here too, and depending on where you are in this country, even now, or what community, it is not as safe to voice what you're doing, or to take the risk to start what you start, or to stand out. The confidence that you all have is a mark that we still have something that is worth using, that can go away. So that the ability that we should focus on is, if you have a voice, use it. In the age of AI, your voice counts twice. Once for the people that you intend to reach, twice for the machines that will have the opportunity to learn and build a large language model on it and amplify that. And so think about that. Your published voice, not just your voice, counts twice. If you need to write something, it's time to speak up. And it is time to learn, and it is time to be more curious as well, because we may not always have that chance. So I'd start there. And I'll put another soundbite in. There's no IEEE standard for human identity. Not yet, at least. And maybe there shouldn't be. But because we're not technologies that need to have standards, but because we're increasingly, as humans, multidimensional, fascinating, creative beings, more increasingly working with non-human co-workers, we can call them AIs, it might be useful to have a fuller spectrum of what it means to be human, mapped, atlased, as it were, so that we're adequately understood and fully resourced in our neurocomplexity. Neurocomplexity resourced makes our ecosystems glow. There's a company called Cultural Infusion that has built this atlas that catalogs the 700 trillion nuances, nuances of human identity. There's still no IEEE standard, maybe there shouldn't be. But there is something that just came up. It's the IEEE MyTerms standard. If you go to myterms.info, it is a machine-readable standard for personal terms and conditions. Basically your own personal OS that can interface with AI agents. How many of you have written a will for when you die? I haven't yet. Some people have. How many of you have written a will to scope how your personal data is going to be used or can be used by the municipal or corporate AI agents coming at you this year? That's what MyTerms is for. Scope that. That is an opportunity. And that is an expression of point one, our freedom of expression, our freedom to speak and to claim and scope my name, image, and likeness, your name, image, and likeness. Who gets to use it and what is it worth? It's as if the Screen Actors Guild applies to us all now. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has been known to say this, that his name, image, and likeness matters. He has to build a contract. He's an actor, a creative person. But every person, 8.2 billion people in the age of AI, need to have something like a Screen Actors Guild contract for how their data will be used and scoped. Kyle, thank you for your generous extra time that you just gave me. I love to talk.
Well, thank you all so much. And thank you all for listening. Is there any questions in the audience? Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go for it.
Yeah. First of all, Kyle, thank you so much for pulling this event together. It's been great helping you set up. Second of all, to everyone on the panel, I really find this to be a really serendipitous moment for me. My background is as an educator and tutor for the last 11 years, and now I own a tech startup in career mobility, right? So what I have been hearing from everyone on this panel are all of these sides, from the startup and how we're funding this and investing in it, to how the system has been and how it is shifting. I think there's such a huge discrepancy in our current education system within the US. And although looking to Switzerland is fantastic, they do not have the same level of immigration and racial divide that we do in the United States, which makes it really challenging to implement this. My senior thesis was on comprehensive health education across the United States, and that property tax, that will get us every time. It's so hard to distribute funding. There's no great way to fund this system. And career mobility and education, that is the way forward. So how do we teach AI? How do we teach humans to interact and trust AI, and I'd love to talk with you a bit more about that. But my question for each one of you is, considering all of these fantastic points you brought up, what do you think is the one step that we can all take today to help this world in a more AI great age and we're transforming everything? So what would be your one sentence takeaway that everyone should do leaving this room?
I think in the interest of time, we'll let one or two people respond to this. But a one sentence takeaway on what people can do to further education.
In relationship with it.
Sure. Send an email to your local school board members and tell them that you guys love your teachers and that you want to see more, you want to see them have all the things that they need in their classrooms, and that you have a value on them being the focal point in a classroom versus a piece of technology.
I would throw in an alternative for those that are outside of school. Something I've really appreciated is reaching back out to professors and doing the same, appreciating them, because most professors don't actually realize the impact of their work. It takes years or decades before they recognize that their students somehow made a bigger impact than just another professor's. And so for those that go the extra mile, it's worth it to go back and say thank you for being the reason I'm here. Shout out to Tim Wen.
Yeah, good question, real quick. Our first investment was in a company that utilizes AI to help students find internships in jobs and really walk them through that process that's traditionally been marginalized by different sorts of barriers. I think what we can do is continue to have more open conversations like this with low barriers to entry. Anyone could have come to this Triibe event tonight, and anyone could have been a panelist, and anyone in the future can be a future panelist. So I think just open dialogue, and there's a lot of different perspectives on AI, good, bad, harmful, and just continuing to talk about it in open conversations with people with different backgrounds is the best way to progress forward and really express all the ideas, because really the most creative ideas come from humans and not in AI.
There's more to who I am and who you are than you may have discovered yet. Carl Jung was known to say, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemicals. If there's any reaction, both are changed. And I feel that when I interact with somebody, a new dimension of who I am gets illuminated, and I walk away different, usually better, hopefully, but definitely different. So make sure that you're interacting with each other on that to illuminate the parts of your capabilities that you wouldn't be able to know about if you didn't share with others. In other words, what he said, thank people.
I've never heard that. Cool. Any other questions? In the back? Yes, go for it. I'll repeat your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just one is kind of quick, maybe the other one maybe a little longer. In Dr. Cheng's slides, there was something called mastery-based education. I'm just curious what that is, paradigm. How does that work? The other one is on the comments of, us not having the workforce to actually move the pre-industrialization of the US. Like how can we create an ecosystem or some kind of program? Like practically, how do we go about filling the football stadium with the engineers and what do you think are the practical steps that we need to educate and train that?
The practical steps to educate and train our workforce to fill a football stadium, and the other phrase was what?
There's something on the slide called mastery-based curriculum.
Mastery-based curriculum.
His question.
Mastery-based
Yeah.
curriculum.
What is question?
What is mastery-based curriculum, and how do we create an ecosystem that can fill a football stadium? What is mastery-based curriculum?
What is
Mastery-based curriculum. Would you add in a slide? Do you remember which question it was?
you hear?
It was the UK, the slide about the UK.
On the top.
Sorry.
What is that?
Can hear.
What is mastery-based teaching?
What is the question?
Mastery-based teaching scaled nationally. What does it mean to have mastery-based teaching in your words? And to the second question on
Outcome is you're talking about the outcome of the system, and for the your question is for the U.S. Or another country.
So for the U.S., how do we train up?
for the U.S. How do we
US.
train?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be honest to you, and very difficult. And because, as you know, I'm an American citizen for 40 years, but I don't vote because none of the candidate for American president are talking about the education. They don't deserve my vote. I care about the education. I care about this country. China have a very, very strong relationship with U.S. since 1971. U.S. opened the door for China. I came from China, 1981, and I only have $75 because I was a teacher in China, and we only have $2 per month salary. But right now, you can see the China, and in New York, and Waldorf belongs to Chinese company, and also the Bakari Hotel belongs to Chinese company. China changed tremendously because of America. Without American education, I don't think so they have today, because of my experience. But how we can make America have a good relationship with the country, focus on the education, this is very difficult. And everybody knows our population, disadvantaged population, growing up very fast. Year 2030, they will become the majority of the America. We got to working with them. They are good future America. We need to help them to have a good education. This is what we need to do, and how we can make American people to understand. I trust American people, everybody understand that education is important, but how we make Washington understand, how we can make our media understand, we have to do something. So I don't know, and I just worry to death, and I very much care. And if you go to another country, and their priority is education, the country and the politicians first they give the people's answer is how to make sure education system is getting better. And China, I know China very well, and the countryside people, and when I left there, and in China, we only have maybe 1 pound per month, the meat, and each family. But right now, they have everything. And they invest in the countryside peasants, the education, build so many schools, and also educate the countryside teachers, and scholarship offers for them, bring them to the best teachers college, and train them. But it's not like us here. I work for Columbia University Teachers College. The tuition is outrageous. And so all of this, how we can make the change. And we really need for America, and we need to care about education. So this is a very serious issue, and I'm so happy for Kai to put the education on this panel. We need to have more people to talk about our education and support our politicians to understand the education.
As a minor note, when I consider how we can move and change going forward, I think about growth mindsets, not just for individuals, but collective consciousnesses or communities. If we are trying to reach a new point, we have to get rid of our bias and do perhaps, as you mentioned, what China and other countries did, and cherry pick the best opportunities to grow and learn from other countries instead of just automatically assuming that we know best. Only if we are able to embrace that we want to grow with our own minds just as much as other countries and regions are, will we be able to move forward instead of just continuously acknowledging a problem. Any other questions? Go for it.
So, thank you so much for everything you guys said. Dr. Cheng, Dr. Davis, sorry. I really appreciate